right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So today we're going to look at another section of the President of the United States, the executive branch. Okay, we're going to be looking more into the requirements to become president and some of the responsibilities. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So here are the objectives. We're going to analyze the president having the power to veto. We're going to examine the significance of giving the president the power to negotiate treaties and create an argument on the extent of executive privileges of the president. Now, this is something that's pretty interesting, and it does require you to kind of listen and pay attention closely because this is a lot of the parts where people think the president is too powerful, and we're going to talk about that. Okay? So here is your warm-up picture. The question is asking you basically, what is this artist trying to say about FDR? Okay, now this picture came out really, really well on your guys' paper as well as on this video. So you can see a word clearly in a bowl. And look at the guy, not the President FDR, the tall one, but the other guy and who he's supposed to represent. Okay, so um, so go ahead, answer the warm-up question. Okay, pause the video because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, so Article 2 of the Constitution specifies that a president should be elected to a term of 4 years. So one term equals 4 years. Okay, now what are the requirements to become a president? Believe it or not, it's not that much. Number one, you have to be a natural born citizen, meaning you have to be born in this country. Okay. Now, can somebody who, let's say, born in Mexico or Canada or anywhere else around the world and becomes a citizen in this country, could they become president? No. No. You have to be born in this country. Um, you have to be born on American soil. American territory counts as well. Okay, so if someone lives in Puerto Rico, that is American territory. So yeah, that would count. If someone was born on a Army base somewhere around the world, that land is United States territory. Same thing with the embassy. If someone is born on that territory, even though it's in another country, if they're born in the embassy or born on the military base, they are an American because that land is American soil. Okay. It's just if you're born even like say here's a border and you're on this side of it, 5 minutes away from it, you're not an American citizen. Okay. On top of that, you have to be at least 35 years old and you have to have lived in the United States for 14 consecutive years um, before you're elected. So if you plan to be president at 35, from the age of 21 to 35, you have to be living in the United States. You can't be spending a year or two in Europe, living over there and, taking residence over there. No, you got to be in the United States. And that's it. That's all the requirements. You don't see anything about education or you have to have some type of degree, you have to be in the military, you have to be a senator first or a congressman or whatever. No, those are the only requirements it takes to become a president. Okay. Now we've only had one president who served more than 2 years, and that was President FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt. Um, a lot of other presidents they limit themselves to 2 year or two terms, and some tried to go for more years, more terms, but the voters said no. Okay, but a lot of them did stop at two out of respect for George Washington. Because George Washington, when he was becoming president, after he did his 2 terms, a lot of Americans wanted him to continue. And he's like, we just got out of a war to get away from a king. And now you guys want me to be here again? So I'd basically be a king here. So no, it makes no sense. So he limited himself to 2 terms, and that sent the message to the people around the world. wow, somebody actually can relinquish power, absolute power in a sense, just like that. I mean, it just shocked a lot of people in the world, and now it's come to be accepted. Like, hey, yeah, Americans, they vote for somebody, and the person who's in power, they step down. They don't hold on. Be like, no, 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 it was a rigged election. It was false. No, we just they that person leaves. The new person who was elected and won becomes president. Okay. Now, because of FDR, and some people were like, you know what? There might be some people in the future who are going to try to run three, four, five times. No, let's stop it at two. So that's where the 22nd Amendment comes in, and it was ratified by the states, and it limits the president to two terms. So Obama cannot be president anymore. Um, Bush Jr. couldn't be president anymore. Bill Clinton can't be president anymore. Uh, Donald Trump can because he only did one term. He can do one more term. Um, Joe Biden, he's still in his first term, so he can do a second term as well. Okay. Now the powers of the president is very vague. Now the term vague means like it's not specific. So like if you going out to a party and your mom, dad, or whoever says, "Hey, when are you coming home?" and you say later, that's being vague because you're not saying an hour from now, 3 hours from now, tomorrow, a week from now. You're not saying specifically when. It could be any time. That's being vague, and that's how the powers of the president are. Excuse me. Um, One of the powers the president has is to make treaties. The president has the authority to make peace with other countries, but here's the kicker: he has to have the Senate's approval by 2/3. Okay, large part of our country's history, it's been done. You know, where the president says, "Hey, I got a treaty with this country. We're going to make peace with them," and the Senate says, "Yeah, sure, sounds good. Way to go." However, there have been two times where the Senate said, "No, we're not signing off on this treaty." The first one was for the Treaty of Versailles to end World War One. We didn't sign that treaty because in that treaty it said that we, the United States, would have to join this League of Nations with Britain, France, Belgium, things like that. And basically, what it says is, if someone attacks, let's say Britain, then France, Belgium, the United States would join in and back them up. And a lot of Americans were like, why do we got to deal with that? That's in Europe. Let them deal with their own crap. We have our own problems. Why should we cross the ocean to help them out? They got that mess. Let them figure it out. The other one was the SALT Treaty, the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, back in 1979. This was between the United States and Russia. Basically, we were both in the middle of Cold War. We're both stockpiling, nuclear weapons. Russia made so many they actually lost some of them. Yeah. So this treaty basically said, "Hey, the United States is going to limit the amount of missiles we have," and Russia was like, "We'll limit ours too." The Senate, however, was like, "You can't trust the Russians. Yeah, they'll tell you, no, we're not going to make any more nuclear weapons." And then back here, they're like, "Keep making nuclear weapons." So that's why that treaty didn't go through. Now, the president does also have the authority to propose legislation. Legislation is just a nice fancy word for law. Usually, typically, the president outlines his agenda in this thing called the State of the Union Address. It's given to a joint session of Congress. Okay, what it means by joint session, that means the House of Representatives and the Senate are both there. And typically, this is done in January. The president gives a speech and basically tells the country where we're at and what his plans are for the future. Okay. Another power that the president has is this thing called a veto. A veto is basically like, I don't like this, you know, denying it. And this deals with laws. So when Congress makes a law, they write out the law, it gets passed in both the House of Representatives and the Senate, then it goes to the president's desk. The president basically has 10 days to sign it. If he doesn't sign it after 10 days, it becomes law. If he signs it, then it becomes law. But the other thing the president can do is veto it, which he says, I don't like this, this is stupid, and gives it back to the Senate and the House of Representatives. Now, here's the part where the framers made sure that the president wasn't all powerful in this position. Basically, if the president says, no, I don't like this law, and it goes back to Congress, Congress can override the president veto, but they need 2/3 vote for it on both houses. This is where things get pretty tricky. If the bill is altered in any way, so let's say someone decides, you know what, I don't like the way it's worded. I'm going to add the word the right here. Just because they added the word the, that is technically now a new bill, and the president gets another veto. Okay, because now it's a new bill. But if they did not make any alterations, they did not take a word away, add a word, rephrased it, anything. If they left the bill the same way it was at the president's office and it gets the 2/3 majority, then they override the president's veto. It has happened before, it can happen again. Okay. The last one is it's a pretty interesting, it's a little politic trick. Um, so just like I told people in class, Congress is kind of like you guys. They have a school year, in a sense, but they have a thing called the session, the beginning and it ends. Now, let's say near the end of the session, Congress passes a law, they send it to the president's desk. Okay. Um, the president, if it's less than 10 days, because remember, he has 10 days to sign it. If it's less than 10 days, he doesn't have to sign it if he doesn't want it. Because the law has to be approved while Congress is in session. Okay. And if the president's like, you know what, there's like 6 days left for Congress and I don't like this bill, I'll just let it die on its own. So that's called the pocket veto. Okay. Sometimes some presidents will wait. Let's say there's 11 days. They'll wait till the ninth day, and then they'll say, I veto it. And now Congress has 2 days to get everyone back to try to vote on this bill again. And chances are they're not going to do it. So that's another way the president can use that pocket veto. He just knows this is not gonna pass. So either not vote for it at all and just let the session die along with the bill, or wait to the last second and when he knows there's no way they can get this approved in this short amount of time, then I'll say no. All right, now this is the more interesting part to me. Okay, it's called the inherent powers. Now, these are powers that are inferred from the Constitution. It basically says that the president needs to have some powers in order to do his job. Okay, so one of the things is the Constitution gives the president power in foreign policy. How do we deal with other countries and things like that? Because remember, the president is the head of state. He is our representatives. He represents the United States. So the president needs to be able to tell us basically this is how we're going to handle this country, our friends, our enemies, these terrorist type of countries. They have to have a policy. Okay. Um, and any type of executive agreement made with another country, it does not require the Senate's approval. Because again, this is something the president needs to do to establish a relationship with another country, things like that. So the Senate does not have a say so in how the president deals with other countries. Okay. Now, some people try to say, hey, makes the president way too powerful, and they tried to go to the courts. And the Supreme Court basically ruled saying, yes, the president does have inherent powers. These are legitimate because he needs these to do his job. Now, here's some other ones that are within that inherent powers. Executive orders. It's an order, rule, declaration, however you want to phrase it, by the president that is basically like a law. Okay. And it requires no action from Congress or states. So some years ago, like President Obama um, said everybody needs to get health care. Some states were like, no, you're abusing your power. And he's like, no, this is an executive order. Everyone needs health care. Some states try to go to the court saying he can't do that. He can't force people to have health care. And the court's like, he can, because that was an executive order. You, as Congress and states, have no say so. Okay. The other really, really big one is the executive privilege. Okay. Um, the president decides what information is released to the public, you know, and it cannot be released to Congress or the courts. But with that being said, there was an instance where executive privilege was not allowed. Okay. What happened was President Nixon um, basically uh, wired his office, and he told some people to break into the Democratic headquarters at the Watergate Hotel to get information on what they had on him, what their strategy was, because he was running for president again for re-election. So he wanted to know what the Democrats had, what was their plan, what kind of things did they have on him, and those people were caught. Okay, and when someone spilled the beans, saying, "Hey, just listen to the tapes. I'm innocent," and the Congress people were like, "Wait, what tapes?" And then when they told Nixon, "Hey, you need to give us those tapes," he's like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! I can't give you the tapes because if you look at the bottom paragraph, he goes, this is executive privilege because there's diplomatic and military secrets on those tapes. And under the executive privilege, I don't have to release them." And the courts are like, no, you abused your power as president, and these tapes will prove whether you're innocent or guilty. So Nixon had to give them up. Okay, but he wasn't right in the sense that uh, the executive privilege is meant to protect um, any type of diplomatic and military secrets that might be shared. And on top of that, it's meant to protect people who advise the president. So like I gave an example in class. Let's say so and so was a spy, and they told the president, saying, "Hey, I heard that this country is going to do this. They're going to do that too in the United States." If the president then goes, "Okay, we're going to attack these countries. We're going to attack this place," and they do it, and he says, "Well, why did you attack this place?" "Well, so and so told me that they're going to do it." If the president ousts his source, do you think that they're going to trust him again? They're going to feel safe telling the president anything? And they're not. They're not. So this diplomatic privilege lets the president say, "Hey, I wish I can tell you, but I can't." That's executive privilege, and it protects that person who gives him the information. Now, one of my favorite things I get asked all the time is, what happens if the president dies? Who takes over? Well, vice president. Oh, I know that, but who's after that? I just love this list. So, if you go down the list, it's vice president, speaker of the House, the president pro temp of the Senate, then the Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Defense, Attorney General, Secretary of Interior, Secretary of Agriculture. I think Commerce is next. Yeah, Commerce, Labor, and Health and Human Services. Okay. Now, I've had some students ask me in the past, how did they come up with this list? Guys, I wish I could say that it was very sophisticated, but it's not. Basically, they just looked and said, okay, after the president is vice president, speaker, and then pro temp. Okay, what happens if all those guys, something happens to all of them? What's next? And all they basically did was like, okay, well, which cabinet position came up first? Secretary of State. Okay, what's second? Treasury. All right, what's third? Defense. What's fourth? Attorney General. Okay, what's fifth? Interior. They just basically went down the list of which job was created first, and then the next one created. The last one on the bottom is the Secretary of Homeland Security. Does that mean that that job is, not as important as Secretary of Labor? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But it's just Homeland Security only popped up in 2002. It's a newborn compared to, Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, you know. So that's how it was created. Just which job was created next, which cabinet position was created next. Put that on the list. So if they have a new one, it's going to be at the bottom of the list. Now, here's another thing a student asked me. I know it's not on the notes, but it's a little fun fact. Um, Apparently, there's a show that came out some years ago called Designated Survivor, in which during the State of the Union address, there was a terrorist attack. The president, vice president, the Congress, the House of Representatives, all those people, all these Secretary of State, Treasury, and all of them died. And basically, somebody was far away from the where the State of the Union was given, and they're kept safe just in case something like that happens. And the students asked me, "Is that true?" Yes, yes, it's true. Before any time the president and Congress um, get together, they basically say this person. This is like I want to say it's the 1980s when they started announcing it. But I want to say it was even back in the 1960s, 1950s, somewhere in there, is when they started really doing the um, designated survivor. You know, so just in case terrorist attacks or something happens, a bomb is placed in this building and it kills everyone. We now have someone far away in an undisclosed location who's going to be the next president if something happens to all those people. So that is true. Yes, they do. They keep somebody far away, undisclosed location, kept them in secret, and once the State of the Union is given, the president's away, um, then they release that person. All right, so here are your two questions. The first one says, do you think the president should have an unlimited amount of vetoes, or should they be limited? Okay, should they have like only like 30, 40, 50 vetoes, or should they have an unlimited amount? Okay, but also remember this. Remember, I told you if Congress changes one word, that's a new bill, and the president would have to use a veto. All right. So think about politics. They would do shady stuff like that. They'd be like, changing. Let's put an "and" in this one, and then next week we'll do the. So he uses more of his vetoes. All right. So think of it like that too. Think how shady Congress can be to try to get their laws and their stuff passed. The other one is this. Remember, I told you the executive orders. There's no ands or buts about it. The president says this is what we're going to do. That's the way it's going to be. So my question to you is this: should Congress have the power to veto the president's executive orders? If he can veto their laws, do you think they should be able to veto his laws? What do you think? Okay, so that's it for this lesson. Hopefully, you learned something new. Hopefully, you enjoyed it, guys. You guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later, okay?